Jesus was a schizophrenic. And so were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were all a patch of schizophrenics. How on earth can you read the Gospels, the teachings of Christ, and conclude that the guy had mental problems? How on earth can you read the Sermon on the Mount and conclude that Jesus had mental problems? Come on.
The video we are about to watch now is between Cliffe and a student who is raising objections to the reliability of the resurrection. After Cliffe lays down a very brilliant defense to the historical claim, one of the students in the crowd raised a very bizarre objection. He claims that Jesus was a schizophrenic. Now, I want you to pay attention to how Cliffe answers the student on the reliability of the resurrection. And after that, I am going to give my own response to the student who claims Jesus was a schizophrenic. Let's dive into the video.
Okay, so we're talking about dead man rising from the grave. So,
Learn it from someone.
If you're talking about someone who believes that happened, how can you know that was actually the truth? Say somebody tells me David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear. They saw it, they believe it. How can they convince me, who didn't see it, that happened?
Right. Well, what you do is you look them in the face and you start asking why. And you don't stop asking why. You just keep on asking, why do you believe that? What is the evidence that you believe, that what you believe is true? And you seek to understand what led that person to that. All right, well, with regard to David Copperfield, we can go out and talk with David Copperfield. And we can figure out, what's David Copperfield into? And did he really make the Statue of Liberty disappear, or didn't he? Is he a magician, or did he really make the thing disappear? Was it an illusion, or was it reality?
What are we talking about with the resurrection? Is it an illusion or is it reality? How can you say that it's reality if it's somebody's account? I mean, how can you take their word as a believer in this event? How can you take their word to be absolute truth of the historic event rather than believing in something that they saw and that they believe in?
Well, you push it back and you go to the source documents, the Gospels. And you ask, okay, I'm going to read these things skeptically. I'm going to ask, first of all, did Christ really die? Now, the interesting thing is the Gospel of John records an interesting tidbit of information. The Gospel of John records that a Roman soldier stuck a spear in the side of Christ, and an issue of watery serum, separate from clotted blood, flowed from his side. Well, they didn't understand that medically in the first century, but we understand medically today that that's a sign of death. Massive heart failure, clotting of the arteries. The guy was dead. He just didn't lapse into unconsciousness and resuscitate, in other words. Then we read, they took his body off the cross, put it in a tomb, and they set a Roman guard to make sure that nobody would steal his body. Now, the disciples were not expecting him to rise from the dead. They were scared, they didn't understand, and they were deserting Christ. But 3 days after he dies, he appears risen from the dead, first of all, to some grief-torn women. Now, I'm impressed with that, because a first-century Jewish male would never have a Jewish woman be his eyewitness in order to gain credibility, because sexism was pathetic in that culture, and women were viewed as chattel. It was horrible. But the record is, Christ first appeared to some grief-torn women. Then he appeared to the apostles. But there was one guy who could have been on the faculty here at UT. His name was Thomas. And he said, not unless I can see Christ with my own eyes, not unless I can take my hand and thrust in the spoon in his side, will I believe. And one night all the disciples are together. Thomas is there. Suddenly Christ stands among them, walks right up to Thomas and says, my man right here, take your hands, put in the nail prints in my hands, take your hand and thrust in the spoon in my side. And Thomas stopped doubting and believed. Then in 1 Corinthians 15, written in 50, 51, 52 AD, the Apostle Paul quotes a hymn, a creed, that Christ died for our sins, was buried, rose from the dead, appeared to the apostles, to James, and to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead, most of whom are still living. And you see that the resurrection of Christ was not made up by a church that was trying to increase its adherents. Right from the get-go, the resurrection of Christ was at the center of the message of these followers of Christ. We have seen this man risen from the dead. Then, one after another, they stood before Roman soldiers, and the Roman soldiers said, acknowledge Caesar as Lord and live, or else maintain that Jesus is Lord and we'll kill you. And every single one of them said, I have seen Jesus risen from the dead, and they died, not for a belief. They died for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. Psychology shows you, people will not die to cover up what they know to be a lie. People will die for a lie, convinced it's true. But these guys died claiming we saw Jesus risen from the dead, he is Lord. Which means if they didn't see him, they were lying.
But this isn't in the Roman writings. There's no record of this slaughter.
Eusebius records it wonderfully.
Schizophrenia is a disease which is common to science.
That's right. Jesus was a schizophrenic. And so were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were all a bunch of schizophrenics. How on earth can you read the Gospels, the teachings of Christ, and conclude that the guy had mental problems? How on earth can you read the Sermon on the Mount and conclude that Jesus had mental problems? Come on.
So when this student says Jesus was a schizophrenic, that is actually not a new claim. People said similar things even in Jesus' own day. In John 10:20, some of the Jews literally said, he has a demon and is insane. Why listen to him? But here's the thing. If you actually read the Gospels, nothing about Jesus fits that description. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder that causes disconnection from reality, confusion, and irrational speech. But Jesus, his words are consistent, deeply coherent, and morally perfect. His teachings have literally shaped civilizations and healed countless minds, not confused them. So to call him schizophrenic is just a misunderstanding. It's reading divine mystery through a purely material lens. And so to the Christian mind, to call Christ mentally ill is a symptom of a fallen human perspective that cannot perceive divine reality. As St. Paul said, the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. In other words, unbelief leads some to interpret divine mystery as madness. And honestly, think about it. No schizophrenic ever spoke with that kind of clarity or inspired moral revolutions for 2,000 years. No delusional man conquers death and changes the course of history. As the early church fathers said, he took on the human mind in order to heal the human mind. That is not madness. That is divine sanity breaking into a broken world. So guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and like and subscribe for more.